The Auburn-Alabama showdown is easily the biggest football game of any season. But in 1957, the game took on even greater significance. The Tigers were undefeated. A victory this day would clinch a national championship. The Auburn Tigers. Their heroics are legendary.
Deep formation handed off to Bob James, the left halfback. James breaks to the outside.
Fredrickson gets the block, goes to the 20, to the 15, to the 10, to the 5. Touchdown, Tucker Fredrickson.
And here's Sullivan faking to Henley. Sullivan's going to go very long. For Beasley. He's there. Touchdown, Auburn. Auburn going after it. Here's a good snap. It is blocked. It is blocked. It's caught on the run. It's caught on the run. He's going to score. David Wagner. David Wagner has scored. And Auburn has tied the game. Nixon's going to float one for Sanders. Sanders. Oh, he caught it at the 2. And he dived in. Touchdown, Auburn. Touchdown, Auburn. Oh, my goodness.
After more than a century of highlights, championships, and breathtaking victories, still some games stand out above the rest. These are Auburn's greatest games.
Welcome to Auburn's greatest games. Of course, the 1957 team was one of the greatest defensive football teams ever assembled, and of course the Alabama game was the crowning achievement of that national championship season. I'm Phil Snow. Along with me is Auburn Athletic Director and historian David Housel. This team, David, had some of the most interesting individuals you'll ever meet anywhere, football or anywhere, and they live in the history of Auburn people and ever shall, I guess.
You're right, Phil. Many, many interesting individuals, many, many interesting stories, all coming together to create and to mold one truly great Auburn football team. Our first and to date only national champion.
So many unlikely personalities. The story of Lloyd Nix, who was
second string halfback.
Right.
Moved to the quarterback position when the first team quarterback was kicked off the team just a few weeks before going to Knoxville to play Tennessee, a team that had went 10-1 the season before. Unbelievable story.
A couple of sophomores that became great All-Americans but were untested, unknown quantities at that time, Zeke Smith and Jackie Burkett.
You're exactly right. Both of them went on to become All-American and become two of the greatest linemen ever to play at Auburn. Don't forget big number 88, Big Red from Alexander City, Jimmy Red Phillips, the only All-American on the 57 team.
Billy Atkins, tremendous kicker and running back.
As you look back at the tapes of the 1957 team, in particular the tape of the Alabama game, you see so many Auburn names that keep coming up again and again. I was just looking at some notes here, and Shane Wasden, who was so important in Auburn's 1988-89 SEC championship teams, and who was one of the key players in Auburn's 1989 win over Alabama, the first time Auburn ever beat Alabama at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Shane's father, Bobby, was on this 57 team. Billy Atkins, Ace Atkins, number 39.
Greatest game against Florida, right?
Ace or his son?
I'm talking about his son.
His son, that's right. You think about tradition, you think about heritage. Here we will see Billy Atkins from Millport, Alabama, who played for a high school team known as the Junior Tide, leading Auburn to a national championship. 36 years later, his son, Ace Atkins, helps lead Auburn to its next undefeated season with those great and timely sacks against Florida. Auburn football has a lot of color, a lot of pageantry, but one of the most beautiful, meaningful things about it is from father to son to generation. But throughout the years, throughout the generations yet to come, this particular day, November the 30th, 1957, Auburn 40, Alabama nothing, will always be one of the key moments the shining punctuation point in a national championship season.
Well said, Mr. Athletic Director. Let me also say that two of the most well-known and colorful individuals of that time were Lloyd Nix, as we said, and Zeke Smith. Here are some of their recollections of those days in 1957 when they were starting out on that great string of wins.
The real key to Auburn's success in 1957 was the play of a previously untested quarterback named Lloyd Nix. Outland Trophy winner Zeke Smith remembers the situation well.
Going into the season, we had Tennessee in 3 weeks, and quarterback had never have taken a snap before, and really we just didn't know what to expect out of him. But he came through. He couldn't run, he couldn't pass, but he won, and he didn't make any mistakes. And he was probably responsible for us being national champions.
Zeke Smith, who would go on to be Auburn's first Outland Trophy winner, and we'll have to remember to remind folks, David, in this tape to watch some of the interior blocking. That they were a tremendous bunch of players by the time they got to the Alabama game.
They really were, Phil, and it's even more amazing that they played both ways. They played on offense, they played on defense, and the great players on this team, many of them excelled on both sides of the football.
The key to that success, I suppose.
That's right. Of course, they won on defense. They refused to beat themselves, and they won on defense. Make no mistake about that. The tape we're about to see, you'll see time and time again where Auburn created breaks, turned interceptions into touchdowns, that kind of thing.
And because they were a good defensive team, they tried to play error-free on offense, right?
That's exactly right. Very conservative. People used to criticize Auburn for only winning 6-0, only winning 7-0, only winning 3-0. But a win is a win is a win is a win is a win. And you know the amazing thing about it? Those wins have withstood the test of time. It's 1957, decade of the 90s, 2000 and beyond. It's still going to be Auburn 3, Georgia Tech nothing. Right. Auburn 7, Georgia Tech nothing. Auburn 40, Alabama nothing. They had 3 teams in those days. The first team would start the game. Normally, they would play the first 10 minutes. The second team would come in and play the last 5 minutes of the first quarter, the first 5 of the second quarter. Then the first team would come back in and play the final 10 minutes of the second quarter. The third team would come in and given situations depending on the ebb and flow of the game, the weather conditions, and that kind of thing.
Amazing. Just amazing the way football was once played. We get used to the platoon system and don't see how that it could operate without it. This undoubtedly was a great, great football team. They felt that if they could get 6 points, they could win the game.
That's exactly right. 3 points, 6 points, 2 points, we'll win.
And they were only behind, what, once or twice the entire
Only
season?
behind one time. Mississippi State with the great Billy Stacy scored right before the half and led Auburn 7-0. Auburn took the opening kickoff in the second half and ultimately wound up winning the game 15-7.
Now, David, what was the situation leading up into this game as far as the national championship was concerned?
Very historic event opened the door to the national championship throne room for Auburn. The week that Auburn beat Georgia 6-0 in Columbus, Georgia. The Auburn-Georgia game used to be in Columbus all the time. Great, great tradition, great, great atmosphere. They had a stadium that would hold about 15 or 20,000 and then put 35 or 40,000 in there. Defense won the game. Auburn held Georgia about 5 times inside the 2-yard line. Recovered a fumble to end the Georgia threat. Auburn 6, Georgia nothing. On that same day, Notre Dame defeated Oklahoma 7-0 and ended Oklahoma's 47-game winning streak. And Rice beat a Texas A&M team coached by Paul Bear Bryant. Texas A&M was ranked #1 at the time. They lost to Rice 7-6, which opened the door. And
so it was then Auburn and Ohio State.
Auburn and Ohio State and Michigan State. Michigan State moved into the #1 ranking after Auburn beat Georgia and after A&M lost, after Oklahoma lost. Michigan State had a hard time beating Kansas State the day that Auburn beat Florida State 29-7. Auburn goes to number 1 at 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, immediately prior to the Alabama game. Woody Hayes erupts in Columbus, Ohio. Whom have they played? Here we are, mighty Ohio State. We played the best teams in football. Coach Hayes, with all due respect, failed to mention that 2 of those best teams in football had won a total of 1 game. Maybe they look at the Big Ten different from the way other people look at it. But at any rate, whom have they played, referring to Auburn?
That was the battle cry, huh?
That's right. It's been a long time. But whenever I see Ohio State play, I'm not for them. And I think any Auburn person who knew anything about Auburn football in 1957, and a lot of people who've learned about it since, they're not Ohio State fans.
Then it became very important for Auburn not only to win the last game, but to win big.
Auburn had a very slim margin over Ohio State. Woody Hayes was campaigning very bombastically up in Columbus, Ohio. Auburn needed not only to win, Auburn needed to win convincingly.
So with that scene set, let's move into Auburn and Alabama, 1957 first half.
The Tigers showed their tenacity on the very first series. The Auburn defense caused a Gary Osteen fumble. Zeke Smith recovered for the Tigers at the Crimson Tide 26. On the very next play, Lloyd Nix handed to number 25, Tommy Larino, who carried the ball to the Alabama 1. The Tide defense held initially as Billy Atkins attempted to take it in on first down, but they couldn't stop him on his next try. Auburn led 7-0, just 1 minute 56 seconds into the contest. The Crimson Tide started its next possession at the 30, but the Tiger defense wouldn't budge an inch. 3 plays later, Alabama punted back to Auburn. Starting with good field position at their 38, the Tigers continued their attack. On second down, Tommy Larino again came up with a big play, taking the ball to the Alabama 30. On first down, Lloyd Nix went to the air. Once again, it was Larino. His catch and run set up first and goal at the 9. 2 plays later, Billy Atkins powered it up the middle, and the Tigers led 14-0, scoring on their first 2 possessions of the game. On their next possession, the Crimson Tide finally got something going. Robert Skelton came in at quarterback and nearly single-handedly moved the ball out to the 40-yard line. But the Auburn defense tightened, and Alabama was forced to punt before it could cross the 50. The Tigers went on offense with Bryant Harvard in for Lloyd Nix at quarterback, but you could hardly tell the difference. Auburn was able to simply outman the Alabama defense. The Tigers were driving for another score when time ran out in the quarter. Nix was back at the helm as the second quarter began. His 1-yard run around the right side gave Auburn a commanding 21-0 lead, just 1 minute and 5 seconds into the quarter. On the following kickoff, Gary Osteen made amends for his earlier fumble with a sparkling 40-yard return. It provided the Crimson Tide its best field position of the game. Bobby Smith, now at quarterback, quickly hit in Charlie Gray to move into Auburn territory. The drive kept moving with another pass, this one to number 32, Clay Walls. But as Alabama threatened, the Tiger defense came up with a big play. It was again Tommy Larino, the Bessemer Flash, with the heroics. He raced 79 yards for the touchdown. Auburn led 27-0. Alabama couldn't move on its next possession, but its punt pinned Auburn back inside its own 10. The Tigers punted from their own end zone on 3rd down just to be safe. They got a great effort from punter Billy Atkins, and Bama started at the Auburn 45. 3 plays later, the defense again made the big play. This time, it was Jackie Burkett stealing a Robert Skelton pass and returning it 66 yards for the touchdown that made it 34-0 at the half.
My goodness, the game was, shall we say, well in hand at the half. Auburn already had their impressive win, it looked like. What was the attitude in the second half, as you recall from your research?
It was a matter of how much, a matter of how much. And there was no doubt about how much Auburn people wanted. They wanted 56-0. When the Auburn-Alabama series was renewed in 1948, Alabama won the first time out, 55-0. And Auburn people, rightly or wrongly, felt that Alabama had run up the score in 1948. Now we're talking about 9 years later, 1957, and the whole chant during the halftime, 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, 56, 56, 56. Coach Jordan wouldn't do it. He let the offense score one more. The offense, they were playing both ways. Auburn scored one more touchdown, and then everybody who was on the team got to play in what for Auburn was a national championship game.
Oh my, what a great game. Okay, let's go back into the second half and see those final closing minutes of the 1957 season, the championship season of Auburn football.
The final scoring in the game came early in the 3rd quarter. Lloyd Nix found All-American Red Phillips in the end zone with a 26-yard scoring pass. With the score 40-0, Coach Shug Jordan called off the Dogs and played backups the rest of the way. A 10th consecutive victory and an undefeated season was assured. When the season concluded, the Tigers were declared national champions of college football by the Associated Press. Coach Shug Jordan and Auburn University President Dr. Ralph Drawn graciously accepted the AP trophy.
Okay, let's go back and talk about the sequence of events. You must remember now in those days the national champion, the voting was done after the regular season and not after the bowl season. What, fill us in on the sequence of events after the game.
Woody Hayes made one mistake. He didn't take Bill Beckwith into account. Bill Beckwith, publicity man in Auburn at the time, talked with Sam Adams, who was a sports editor of the paper here in Montgomery. And they determined that in those days, every AP outlet in the country had a vote. And so they contacted all of the outlets in the Southeast, all of the outlets in the traditional anti-Big Ten country. And they said, don't vote, hold your vote, hold your vote. And then they said, they sent out a telegram, now vote. And it was a landslide win for Auburn. Woody Hayes was doing the talking. Bill Beckwith and Auburn were doing the working. And Auburn was named #1 in the nation at 6 a.m. on December the 3rd.
That was on Tuesday?
On Tuesday, December the 3rd, 1957. Auburn had 8,000 students at the time, and you can imagine the pep rally they had at Toomer's Corner. It's an interesting footnote to this 1957 season that the president of the student body who led that pep rally was a young man named Ken Mattingly, who would later go on to become an astronaut, make one of the moon flights, and when Apollo 13 had its problems on its way to the moon, Ken Mattingly, the Auburn graduate, the astronaut, got into the simulator in Houston and helped get the other astronauts back home safely.
Tremendous.
Footnote to a national championship season.
Auburn's national championship year, 1957. David, thank you for the remembrances, and we will see you again next time on another of Auburn's greatest games.